Well, I'll do another video here today on a slightly different topic, but it is very related to the political environment. And that is, yesterday I saw an interview with a couple of financial experts discussing the state of the economy and discussing how Trump has done with the economy versus the Obama administration. And of course, the Democrat immediately moved back to the old thing that Obama saved us from that really bad Republican uh, uh, Bush economy. Well, that's completely nonsense. And I think that sometimes somebody needs to address this. And I'm very annoyed at Republican spokespeople that never do take the trouble to reject it. Um, let's let's go back to what really caused the economic crisis of 2008, which led to the Obama administration and much of what's happened since then. Essentially, in a nutshell, the policies that led to it were not Bush policies. They were actually Clinton policies. And in some ways, they even go back to Carter. And so effectively what it comes down to, it's part of the Democrat racial politics about the so-called redlining issue and housing, and the attempts by the Clinton administration to deal with it. By the way, if you like these videos and can subscribe to my YouTube channel and give me a like, I appreciate it. It might help get this site going a little bit. And at the end, I'm going to discuss a little bit also about the current political campaign, but I want to focus on this issue because it's kind of relevant to how we see the economy. What happened was in the 90s, the Clinton administration, Justice Department put a lot of pressure on the banks to make loans to people in, let's say, depressed neighborhoods, mostly minority community neighborhoods, against the theory that they were redlining or somehow racially prejudiced, where in fact they weren't racially prejudiced at all. The business people don't care about your race, they care about profit. And I assure you that they'll make a deal with any race, creed, or color if it makes them profit, and they'll discriminate against anybody also if it loses them money. Well, they were threatened with government action, which would cost them a lot of problems about regulation and lawsuits, and so they were caved into essentially providing these loans to those neighborhoods. Now, at the first sight, you can say, well, but it wasn't underprivileged neighborhoods that brought down the economy, was it? Well, no, it wasn't. I used to get in an argument with an African-American colleague of mine back where I used to work years ago about this. It isn't those neighborhoods that caused the problem as such. What happened was the standards for approving mortgages were reduced, and a large number of low-quality mortgages were then put on the market. And since they had to do some for people they knew were likely to default, they went ahead and gave them to just about everybody. And so the result was what you started having happen is all sorts of more affluent people started getting mortgages on houses they really couldn't afford also in order to have that dream home that they really couldn't afford. And then, of course, the other group of people are involved, and I remember this from the agent that sold me my house many years ago in another state, who had something like 80 rental houses, and I was like, how could you possibly do that, being a person that only got out of the military a few years earlier, and obviously weren't that rich, and he said, well, there's these signature loans. And so essentially they were using these subprime mortgages also to finance rental properties and stuff. And so the result is we had a tremendous amount of these low quality loans out there due to basically it started off with this. And the fact is that the Democrats in Congress particularly were very militant about not reining this in when it was started getting out of control. It further was the problem was, let's say, made more difficult because of 9/11 and the efforts to reduce the interest rates to near zero to prop up the economy during that crisis. So when they began then to return interest rates at what you might call a normal level, all of a sudden these adjusted rate low quality mortgages started going south rather quickly. And the thing is, the way they had created these financial instruments in which they mixed those in with other mortgages as kind of a mortgage security, the situation became very unstable. Add to the fact that they were under what was called a mark to the market rule, which meant that when they when they didn't trade right, you had to consider them as worthless as they were on the market on a given day. And so the result is the whole economy went tilt. And that's what led to the collapse. And I don't see any of that was so much a Bush policy or anything you would associate with Republican conservatism. It was basically a mismanagement, and the original impetus clearly comes out of the left. And the fact is that, even when you're in office, I'll agree that the thing you could attribute Bush to is he didn't fight hard enough. But the fact of the matter is the Congress was in no way willing to fix that problem. And so I think that it's kind of a bad thing to tag the Republicans with that. In addition, the Obama economy had an interesting characteristic to it, which I like to point out, is that they did a tremendous amount of deficit spending at that time. Of course, nothing like what we're doing in the COVID crisis, but they did. And the economy was very sluggish throughout that whole period. And what really held it back was all the regulations they were putting on. So you sort of had essentially where on the one hand they had their foot on the gas pedal, on the other hand they've had the emergency brake on and the foot brake on, and the car was really struggling to move forward. So that's kind of where the economy was throughout the Obama years. And one of the main things that Trump himself assures us of and talks to, which is true, is he did a lot of deregulation. By taking these burdensome regulations off, it probably did more to stimulate the economy even than the tax cuts did. So I just thought that'd be worth a little while to kind of address this issue and get this idea out to people, because this is there's nothing really tremendously smart about the way the Obama administration managed the economy at all. And we can criticize Trump, I guess, in some areas perhaps, but I think that it did a lot better than Obama did on the regulation issue. And also, by the way, the tax cuts that he gave were pretty much directed toward the middle class to maybe the upper middle class. The only big break that wealthy people got out of it really was a small cut in the top marginal rate, and it was designed to counterbalance the loss of the deduction of the state income taxes. And it was targeted toward the sort of a median state that had a state income tax of around 6%. So those states basically broke even if you're in the affluent class. If you're in a California or a New York or Massachusetts scenario, something like that, you were hurt by the tax changes. And if you're in a state that has no income tax, like New Hampshire or Texas or something like that, you were helped by it if you're very affluent. So, but other than that, I think it was mostly focused on that. And the other was the business cuts, which I think everybody that knew what was going on thought that was a good idea. And it certainly created a lot of jobs. I mean, you can feel good about pulling money out of companies. When you pull money out of companies, get rid of jobs too. So I think that's kind of what I think about the economy and versus the two parties, pretty much. I'll make a final thing, like I promised at the beginning here, a little addressment about the state of the race. There's not much new has come in polling since the last debate. And so it's hard to see what impact it's had to date. Debates actually, ultimately play out in a way that the post-debate spin is probably what mostly determines the effect. And I think that basically Trump came out of the debate with more ammunition than Biden did. So I think that in that sense, it's a Trump win. But we'll have to wait and see till some polling comes out probably tomorrow to see kind of what, and the day after to see kind of, what the impact really was. So I'll close this for now, and until next time.